In this video, we are going to discuss about the arbitrage process under approach. But before starting with the arbitrage process under approach, let's understand the generalized concept of arbitrage. So the meaning of the term arbitrage is nothing but selling a product at a higher price in one place and purchasing the same product at a lower price from another place is known as the arbitrage process. For example, let's take a product, let's take calculator. Let's say this calculator is selling at a price of rupees 100 in the first cross. Now the same calculator, similar kind of calculator is sold at rupees, let's say 85 rupees in the third cross, right? So in one place it is being sold at 100, the another cross it is being sold at 85 rupees. Now let's say you are in second cross and you have one calculator in your hand. Now what you can do is you can take this calculator and go to the third cross shop and sell this calculator to the shopkeeper. You're just reversing the transaction. Instead of paying him 100 and purchasing a calculator, you're giving him a calculator and receiving 100 rupees. Right? So you went to the first cross with the calculator and you gave this calculator to the shopkeeper and you received 100 rupees from the shopkeeper. Now you have 100 rupees with you. Now with this 100 rupees, you can go to the third cross and pay him this 100 rupees and purchase a calculator from him. So now you're going to pay 100 rupees to the third cross shopkeeper. In return, what he will give you? He will give you a calculator. Plus, in addition to that, he will give you rupees 15. So now what is happening? You are selling a product at a higher price in one place, which is nothing but the first cross. You sold the product for 100 rupees. Now you are going to another place, which is nothing but the third cross, and you are buying the same product at a lower price. So now this process is known as arbitrage process, and this process gives you a gain for 15 rupees, and this gain is nothing but your arbitrage gain. But this situation cannot persist for a long period of time because you are not the only intelligent person here. Everyone knows that, everyone will come to know that, okay, the calculator is selling at 85 rupees in the third cross. So everyone will start purchasing the calculator from the third cross. Then the first cross shopkeeper will understand, okay, in third cross, the product is being sold at 85 rupees. If I'm selling it at 100, no one will purchase from me. So what the shopkeeper from the first cross will do? He will obviously reduce his price to rupees 85. So at some point of time, the price of the product will become equal in both the places. So once the price of the product becomes equal in both the places, the opportunity for arbitrage comes to an end. This arbitrage is possible only till the prices are different. Once there is no difference in the price, then the arbitrage process comes to an end. So this is the generalized concept of arbitrage. Now let's understand arbitrage process in approach. So here, according to approach, value of levered form should be equal to value of unlevered form if they are similar in all aspects. But sometimes, due to some inefficiencies in the market, value of levered form will not be equal to value of unlevered form. One firm will be overvalued and the other firm will be undervalued. So what the investors will do? The investors will sell the shares of the overvalued firm at a higher price because already the firm is overvalued. So the investors can sell the shares at a higher price and they can buy the undervalued firm for a lower price. So thereby they will have some arbitrage gain. And again, this arbitrage process will continue till the value of levered firm is equal to value of unlevered form. Once these values become equal, the opportunity for arbitrage comes to an end. So let's take a proper numerical example to understand the arbitrage process and approach. Let's look at this example. There are two companies, N Limited and M Limited, having earnings before interest and tax of 20,000. So EBIT of both the companies, N Limited and M Limited, are 20,000. M Limited is a levered company having a debt of 1 lakh at 7% rate of interest. What do we mean by the term levered company? A company is said to be a levered company if it has debt in its capital structure. M Limited has debt of 1 lakh, which means M Limited has some debt component in its capital structure. So that makes M Limited a levered company. And N Limited is an unlevered company which does not have any debt in its capital structure. The cost of equity of N Limited is given as 10% and cost of equity for M Limited is given as 11.5%. Why cost of equity of M Limited is greater than cost of equity of N Limited? Because M Limited has some amount of debt in its capital structure. So equity shareholders of M Limited obviously expect higher rate of return than the equity shareholders of M Limited. So that is the reason why the cost of equity for M Limited is greater than the cost of equity of N Limited. Compute how arbitrage process will be carried on. Assume the investor owns 10% of M Limited, right? So here, before starting with the arbitrage process, we need to calculate the value of the firm. Only then we know which firm is overvalued and which firm is undervalued, right? So let's calculate the value of the firm. Working note 1. Value of the firm. So here we have two companies. One is M Limited and En Limited. We know that EBIT of both the companies, it is 20,000 and 20,000. So EBIT minus interest will give us EBT. So what is the interest paid by M Limited? M Limited has a debt of 1 lakh on which they have to pay 7% interest. So interest paid by M Limited will be 7,000 rupees. And for N Limited, no interest is applicable because N Limited is a unlevered company. They do not have any debt in its capital structure. So there is no interest applicable for N Limited. Now EBIT minus interest will give us EBT. So EBT for M Limited is 20,000 minus 7,000, it is 13,000. And EBT for N Limited is 20,000 minus 0, it is 20,000 itself. Now we are dealing with traditional capital structure theories where we are assuming 0% tax. So if there is no tax, I can say that EBT is equal to EAT. If EBT of a company is 13,000 and there is no tax, then EAT of the company is also 13,000. So EAT for M Limited is 13,000 and EAT for N Limited it is 20,000. Now in the question they have given us the cost of equity for both the companies. Cost of equity for M Limited it is M Limited it is 11.5% and N Limited it is 10%. So cost of equity for M Limited is 11.5%. Cost of equity for N Limited it is 10%. So now we can calculate the value of equity. What is the value of equity formula? It is EAT divided by KE or net income divided by KE. Both net income and EAT are same. So value of equity will be 13,000 divided by 11.5%. We get, so it is 13,000 divided by 0.115 or 11.5%. We get value of equity for M Limited, it is 1,13,043 rupees. This is the value of equity for M Limited. Value of equity for N Limited will be EAT of 20,000 divided by cost of equity of 10%. So we get 2 lakh. 20,000 divided by 10%, we get 2 lakh. So this is the value of equity for N Limited and for M Limited and N Limited respectively. Now value of debt. What is the value of debt for M Limited? It is directly given in the question as 1 lakh, right? So value of debt for M Limited it is 1 lakh and value of debt for N Limited it will be 0 because it is an unlevered company. So we know the formula that value of equity is equal to, value of the firm is equal to value of debt plus value of equity. Value of debt for M Limited it is 1 lakh and value of equity for M Limited it is 1,13,043. So when we add value of debt plus value of equity, we get 2,13,043 as the value of firm for M Limited. So value of firm is nothing but value of debt plus, value of equity plus value of debt. Now value of debt for N Limited it is 0 and value of equity it is 2 lakh. So what is the value for N Limited? It is 2 lakh itself. right? So here we can see that value of M limited is greater than the value of N limited, which is value of the levered firm is greater than value of the unlevered firm. So value of both the firms are not equal, right? So here, if the values are not equal, the investors have an opportunity for the arbitrage. So what the investors will do, they will sell the shares of the overvalued firm. So here, which firm is overvalued? The levered firm is overvalued. M limited is overvalued. So investors will sell the shares of M limited and they will purchase the shares of N limited. Why? Because N limited is undervalued. So they will purchase the shares of N limited after selling the shares of M limited, right? And this process will continue till value of the levered firm becomes equal to value of the unlevered firm. So let's see how the arbitrage process continue. So here the arbitrage process, when the value of levered firm is greater than the value of unlevered firm, there's a three-step approach that must be followed to carry out the arbitrage. First, investor sells his holding in the levered firm. In this question, what is the holding of the investor? It is given in the question as investor owns 10% of the levered firm, which is M limited, right? So here, what is the total value of equity for M limited? It is 2,13,043, out of which 10% is owned by the investor. So first, what the investor will do, the investor will sell his share of investment from the levered firm. So what is the share? It is 10% of 1,13,043. So 10% of 1,13,043. So by selling the shares of the overvalued firm, the investors will get 11,304. Right? So this is the cash inflow for the investor. Now, the investor was holding 10% in the levered firm. Now he sold the shares of the levered firm and he received cash. Now he has to invest the same 10% in the unlevered firm, right? What is the value of the unlevered firm? It is 20,000. Right? We are talking about only equity investment, not debt investment. What is the value of equity for the unlevered firm? Unlimited, it is 2 lakh. So the investor, if he wants to invest 10% in the unlevered firm, what is the amount of cash that is required by the investor? The investor requires 20,000 rupees to invest 10% in N limited because 2 lakh is the total value on which he has to invest 10%. So 20,000 is the cash required by the investor. But does he have 20,000 in his hand? No, he has only 11,304. So in step 2, the investors should borrow. Now, how much he should borrow? In order to invest 10% in N limited, he requires 20,000. He has 11,304 in his hand. So should he borrow 20,000 is the required money? He has 11,304. So what is the difference? It is 20,000 minus 11,304. We get 8696. So should the investor borrow 8696? No. The investor should borrow equal to the proportion of his debt in the levered firm, which means, listen, previously the investor was a shareholder of M Limited. Now M Limited is overvalued. So what the investor is doing? The investor is selling his shares. Now, as an equity shareholder of M Limited, the investor was holding 10%. Investor was holding 10% of equity shares of the levered company or M Limited. Now this M Limited, which is a levered company, has a debt of how many rupees? It is 1 lakh rupees. Now clearly understand this 1 lakh rupees of debt is a financial burden for the company. Why it is a financial burden? Because the company has borrowed 1 lakh rupees, which means that there is an obligation on the company's side to repay this 1 lakh along with the interest. So it is a financial burden for the company. Now, on whom this financial burden will fall upon? This financial burden will fall upon the equity shareholders of the company because ultimately they are the owners of the company, right? So this financial burden will fall upon the equity shareholders of the company, right? Now the investor was holding 10% of equity in the company. So I can say that 10% of this financial burden will be borne by the investor. What is 10% of the financial burden? The total financial burden is 1 lakh, of which 10% will be borne by the equity shareholder, is other investor holding 10%, right? So his financial burden will be 10,000 rupees. Now, the second step, the investor should borrow rupees 10,000, not 8696, right? Why he should borrow 10,000? Because when he was a shareholder of the levered firm M Limited, his financial burden was 10,000 rupees, right? Now, in the first step, the investor sold the shares of M Limited. Previously, as a shareholder of M Limited, he had this 10,000 as his financial burden. But now, in the first step, the investor sold his shares in the M Limited. Right now, by selling the shares of M Limited, the investor got rid of this financial burden of 10,000. Right now, what he is going to do? He is going to invest the money in N Limited. In N Limited, he does not have any financial burden. Why? Because N Limited does not have any debt. Right. So now, N Limited and M Limited cannot be compared directly. Right? Why? Because the investor had a financial burden in M Limited. But by moving his investment from M Limited to N Limited, he is escaping that financial burden. Now, in order to retain that financial burden, the investor should borrow this 10,000 rupees on his personal capacity. This 10,000 is not borrowed by the company. The investor will borrow this 10,000. It's a personal borrowing made by the investor, right? Why he is borrowing this 10,000? To maintain the same level of financial risk. Only then M Limited and N Limited can be compared. If the investor is not borrowing this 10,000, then M Limited and N Limited cannot be compared. Because in M Limited, the investor had a financial risk. In N Limited, there is no financial risk. Right? So you should borrow this 10,000. At what rate of interest he should borrow? He will borrow it at 7% interest. Why 7%? Because M Limited was borrowing funds at 7% rate of interest. So it is assumed that the investor can also borrow at the same rate of interest. Now the investor should borrow 10,000 rupees at 7% interest. Right. Now in the step 3, investors purchases shares of the unlevered company. Why unlevered company? Because unlevered company is undervalued. So investor purchases the shares of the unlevered company equal to what percentage? Equal to the same percentage of his holding in the levered company. As an investor in M Limited, as an investor in the levered company, the investor was holding 10%. Now he will invest the same 10% in 10% equal to 10%. Okay. Now listen. In the first step, the investor received 11,304 by selling the shares of the levered company. It's a cash inflow. Then in the second step, the investor further, he borrowed 10,000 rupees, right? So again, it is a cash inflow. Now, what is the total cash available with the investor? So total funds available with the investor is equal to 21,304. How 21,304? Because in the first step, he sold the shares and he received 11,304. Plus, in the second step, he borrowed further 10,000. So totally he has 21,304 rupees in his hand. Out of which he is going to invest 10% in levered form. Sorry, unlevered form. Invest 10% in unlevered form, which is unlimited. Right? Now, what is the total value of equity in the unlevered form? It is 2 lakh, right? Out of which the investor is going to invest only 10%. So it is 10% of 2 lakh rupees. So the investor is going to invest 20,000. So now the investor has surplus cash of 1,304. Right? How? Because the investor has 21,304 rupees in his hand, out of which he is going to invest only 20,000 in the N Limited or the unlevered company. So the remaining 1,304 is the surplus fund available with the investor. Now let's understand what is the effect of this arbitrage process or how it is going to benefit the investors. So listen, for this, let's compare the returns for the investor in both N Limited and M Limited. So return for the investor in M Limited. So previously the investor was holding 10 percentage in M Limited, right? What is the earnings attributable to the equity shareholders? It is 13,000. So this 13,000 is the total amount of profit that is attributable to the equity shareholders of the company, out of which the investor holds 10 percentage, right? So what is the return available to the investor? It is 10 percentage of 13,000. So the return earned by the investor is 1,300 from M Limited. Now let's calculate the return for the investor from N Limited. Return for the investor in N Limited. In N Limited, again, in step 3, we can see that the investor invested 10 percentage, right? What is the earnings attributable to the equity shareholders in N Limited? It is 20,000. Right now, on this 20,000 is the total amount of profit attributable to all the equity shareholders. This investor holds 10 percentage of N Limited now. So what is the return earned by this investor? So which is equal to 10 percentage of 20,000. So the return earned by the investor is 2,000 rupees. But wait, in the second step, we can see that the investor borrowed some money. How much did he borrow? 10,000. On this 10,000, the investor should pay what? Interest, right? So this return is the gross return. When you have to calculate the net return, we have to subtract interest at 7 percentage. So the investor borrowed 10,000 on which he should pay 7 percentage interest. So 700 is the interest that will be paid by the investor. So the net return or net benefit to the investor is only 1,300 rupees. So here we can see that the return earned by the investor in M Limited is also 1,300. Return earned by the investor in N Limited also it is 1,300. In both the companies, the investor is earning same amount of return. Then what is the advantage? The advantage is this surplus of 1,304, which means even after investing in the unlevered company, even after investing the same proportion of 10 percentage in the unlevered company, the investor is having 1,304 rupees of surplus cash in his hand, right? So this is what? This is the arbitrage gain for the investor. Now the investor is able to earn the same amount of return with some amount of surplus cash in hand. So this 1,304 is the arbitrage gain for the investor.